Okay, so here we go with Wargaming, the actual battle of Santiago de Cuba, and I'm going to be using my favourite set of naval wargames rules, Sea Creek 5. Um, I have to just describe these rules a little bit to begin with. I'm not going to actually show you a dice roll blow by blow account of the war game, because there's an awful lot of dice rolling in this set of rules and consulting tables and various factors and so on, and it would really occupy too much time. So I think what I'm going to do is just give you a little interspersed description, maybe at the end of each turn, play the game and just give you a summary of how each turn's gone. Like any sort of set of war games rules, there are a lot of factors that the designer has to take into account, and Sea Creek 5 has got a bit of a reputation as being what's termed a rivet counters set of rules, in that it is highly detailed, and it's extremely well designed though, so despite the immense amount of detail in it, it's an extremely playable game. But when you look at the list of credits, the writers are two people called Richard R. Sartori and Jack L. Joyner, but there was an immense amount of input from a lot of highly respected experts in their fields of naval design, armament, ballistics, all that kind of thing. They've gone to a lot of trouble to make this set of rules as realistic as they possibly can, whilst at the same time retaining the ability to actually play a game out on the table without it becoming too overburdened with detail. Now, I really like this set of rules, and I have tried over the years to pass my enthusiasm on to my colleagues at the local wargaming club and my friends who wargame, and I haven't had much success, to be honest. Part of that is due to the fact that these rules are printed in America. They're expensive anyway, and they're even more expensive when you have to pay for the price of shipping them across the Atlantic and so on. But the other reason is that people have a sort of different approach to me, I think, sometimes, in what they want out of a naval war game. To my mind, the majority of naval battles weren't huge scale battles. People tend to think, in this era, which is 1880 to 1945, people tend to think of battles like Jutland in the First World War, or the Battle of Midway in the Second World War, or Leyte Gulf, or something like that, where there were lots of ships involved. But to my mind, most of the actions really involved up to a maximum of about 6 ships per side. I'm thinking of battles like Coronel, or the Falklands in the First World War, or the Battle of the River Plate, or the Denmark Straits in the Second World War. And when you're only playing with that small number of ships, it is very easy to introduce into the rules a lot of aspects of what's going on inside the ship itself. When you go beyond that, yes, it does become a bit of a headache. and I don't think you could ever use these set of rules to refight an action such as Jutland. Um, and I think in a way that's what puts a lot of people off, is that they immediately want to fight battles like Jutland in exactly the same way as you get into Napoleonic wargaming and you immediately want to refight Waterloo or Leipzig or something like that. You have to sort of be less ambitious and think smaller scale. So in that respect, the Battle of Santiago de Cuba is an ideal battle to stage using Sea Creek 5. There were 6 ships effectively on each side. There's a couple of small armoured yachts that I'm not including on the American side in that number. But it's an ideal game to play using this sort of rules, an ideal battle to play using this sort of rules. Now, as well as the rules themselves, which are actually only up to about here, the rest of this binder is full of charts and data that isn't necessarily going to come into the game. Out of all that back section, you really only need about 3 or 4 pages that you could photocopy and keep with you. So you don't really need to keep referring back to this binder. But as well as the rules, you need to get data for the ships that you're playing with, which again does add to the expense. There's no getting around that. And again, I think the expense is well worth it, because there is incredible research that's gone into all these various CDs. So depending on the nations that you're interested in, you have to buy CD sets of data for the navies. So for instance, the cost of the British Navy was immense during this period. It needs 2 CDs to contain all the information. The Russian Navy is 1 CD. This is one for Japan, Germany, France, the United States. I think I've got them all that are available at the moment, and Italy. So they're essential, and they give you the details of every single ship in that navy during the period the rules cover, 1889 to 1940, 1945. And on top of that, they give you any changes that were made to the ship, because frequently armament was changed or armour was improved. Ships came into port for refits and so on, and it has all those changes as well. When you buy the rules, they simply come with a single CD, and on that you can find some token sample of ships, but it's unlikely that it will precisely cover the battles and the periods that you're interested in, but there is some information on this. But on this disc, you also get about 20 battles where they lay out, they give you all the ship's logs, and they give you advice on how to set the game up and so on. And you may have noticed that I'm playing a battle that involved the Spanish and the Americans, and whereas the Americans have a CD, the Spanish don't, and that is one area where these rules have, I'm not going to say failed people, but they've disappointed people, in that they had promised to publish a CD containing the details of all the minor navies of the world, which would have included nations such as Spain and China, for instance, Austria-Hungary. those kind of navies. And that was the last update on the website. Is ancient now. It was about 2 years ago, and there's no further news forthcoming. So it's looking like that project has petered out. But fortunately for me, on this individual disc that comes with a set of rules, there are descriptions of the ships that were involved in the Battle of Santiago de Cuba. So I have been able to print out log sheets for each of the Spanish ships involved. This is one of them, the Cristobal Colon. It's a two-sided thing, and again, this worries a lot of people when they first see lots of data like this. But this log sheet is generic for the entire game. So a great deal of it is irrelevant to this particular ship. It has things like aircraft, if the ship carried aircraft, radar, that kind of thing. Obviously that doesn't apply back at the end of the 19th century. But the detail that's on here is critical if you want to play the game. So without that CD and the information on that, I wouldn't be able to use Sea Creek 5 to reenact this battle. Now, to briefly summarise how the game works, as I said, you have two sides to this log sheet. On this side here, there are a list of orders that you are allowed to give the ship. So you're not making up sort of vague commands for the ship. You have to select from a menu, and they're all fairly sort of bog standard kind of things that involve the course and speed that the ship's going to take, whether you're going to fire torpedoes, whether you're going to fire the guns, what you're going to fire at, and so on. And this chart allows you up to 20 turns worth of orders, and all you do is you either put a cross in the box against the order that you want to make, or you have to put in a number. So if you're going to put in a speed or a direction, for instance, you have to put in a figure representing the speed in knots or the bearing in degrees, for instance. But that is a very simple system, and you are limited to a certain number of orders that you can give each turn, and that number is variable. It depends on the scenario and so on, and the ship's quality, etc. So in the case of the Cristobal Colon, it has a bridge command rating of 6, which means that in any one turn it can only put 6 entries in each of these columns. That seems quite a lot to begin with, but as the game progresses and the ship has to take more and more actions, you do find that sometimes 6 isn't enough, especially as that number can be reduced by the effect of damage on the ship, which is a very interesting rule. For instance, if the ship's taken a lot of superficial damage, that could affect communications in respect of wires being cut, passageways being blocked, all that kind of thing, and that number will go down. And also the crises that are occurring on the ship, such as fires and repairs that require doing, might increase as well. So that's basically how you control the ship. On the other side, you've got all the factors to do with the armament and the armour. So in the case of the Cristobal, she has a primary armament, a secondary armament, and a tertiary armament. But if you remember, I did say that the Cristobal Colon did fight the battle without its primary armament, and in fact on here there's a specific note saying the main battery 254mm guns had not been fitted when the ship was sunk in 1898. So really that is there as a sort of hypothetical, these two gun turrets here, as a hypothetical situation, and in this particular game I won't be using that primary battery. But within these areas you have all the details about how far the guns can fire, what is considered to be extreme range, long range, medium range and short range, the effects that the shell can have at each of those ranges, the number of shells that can be fired at each of those distances. So, for instance, the further the range extends, the less shells you can actually fire, because the gun has to fire, the shells have to hit the target or drop into the sea around the target. A gun aimer has to then spot the splash of the shells and report back any adjustments to the trajectory that are required. So the greater the distance, the longer that takes to happen, and consequently the fewer shells you can fire. There's a fire control table which gives you a factor dependent on how fast your target is moving, how large it is, whether it's presenting its broad aspect to you or its narrow aspect, all that kind of thing. So that's really the firing aspect of it. And over here you write down what for each turn, what battery is going to fire and at what target ship. And you've also got other details on here, such as the torpedoes that the ship is carrying, in which direction they're pointing, the torpedo tubes are pointing, all that kind of thing. Having successfully hit your target, which you will have to roll dice to decide and refer to this table here in the book, then if we reverse the situation now and say that the Cristobal Colon had been hit, you would know the penetrative power of the type of shell that had been fired from this table here, and then you refer to a chart in the main rule book to decide what surface of the ship had been hit. So there are 9 various types of surface. Some of them are vertical, some are horizontal, and each of those has a specific thickness of armour. So knowing on the Cristobal Colon the strength of the armour for any particular surface of armour, and knowing the type of shell that has hit it, you can then calculate the damage. And very often all that happens is that the ship has a damaged tier, and that hit will remove points on the damaged tier, and so this is general damage to the ship basically. And as you go along that tier at various points on it, you have to roll to see if any specific damage has been caused to the ship. But each time a ship is hit in that manner, there's also a possibility that will vary depending on the circumstances of any specific damage that's been done to the ship. And having determined that might have happened, and the area that it's happened in, you then refer to this chart here, which is very cleverly designed. If I can get it out the wrapper, I'll show you the one in the book, it's probably easier. So this is the same chart. I bought the other one as a spare. So it will give you a number for the damage effect, and you look it up. For instance, damage 172 is uncontrolled flooding possible, and you roll against the chart to see if the flooding has occurred. Now what you'll find is it's very cleverly knitted into the other chart, in that flooding, damage 172, is only going to have happened if you've had a hit on, say, the hull. If you'd struck something like a gun turret, there's no possibility of the damage number 172 coming up. So what you get developing is a kind of storyline, because consequent upon this damage, you might have to roll for an additional damage effect, and that damage effect will be something similar related to the flooding, which is in turn related to the hit on the waterline, on the hull. So it's a very good set of rules for building up a sort of narrative to the battle. You wouldn't further from that hit there, you wouldn't get, for instance, a fire occurring in a magazine, because that's not possible from a hole in the below the waterline in on the side of the ship. So the whole thing is really well integrated, and it produces a superb game. But as I say, whilst I'm playing the game, because I'm going to be referring backwards and forwards between various charts and rolling dice, it wouldn't make for particularly good viewing. So what I'm going to do is play the battle out and give you an update each turn with the storyline as it develops on each ship. Hope that makes sense. So next stage is to lay the table out.